Welcome back. The George Zimmerman trial, it cracked open a host of questions about where as a country we are when it comes to race relations. So as much as they said this isn't about race, of course it was. Well, last night we had a really fascinating, I thought, and full-throated conversation about that very subject. And tonight I want to continue it here. And for a sense of just how divided we are as a country, I want you to take a look at a poll. Now, only 9% of African Americans approved of the verdict in the Trayvon Martin case, while 51% of whites said that justice was served. Now, 4 in 5, in fact, even more, when it came to that, more than 80% of African Americans disapproved of the verdict, while only 30% of whites disapproved. Now, I also want you to look at 2 maps that Andrew found earlier today. First, you got this map. Now, the darker shades shows where there's a higher concentration, of African Americans. Now, think about that and look where you see the dark coloring. And this next one shows social mobility darker, and the shading means where there is less social mobility. So the idea that we were talking about, beyond just the case and everything, about the concentration of both poverty and about where opportunity is smaller, there definitely overlaps. But I'm curious your reaction when you saw the polls today, because I was surprised. I thought, okay, maybe blacks and whites along predictable lines would have had a little bit of a gap, but I wouldn't have thought it would have been as broad as it was, that the jury got it right and how many whites thought they did versus how many blacks thought they did.
I think it was relatively close given the attitude towards whites and blacks. The majority of whites feel like in this country blacks have better opportunities or more opportunities in economics and education and other, where the majority of blacks feel like, no, we haven't gone that far. So there's still that disparity there. And that's close into what the same disparity that exists is we still have a way to go. Whites feel like blacks have gone much further than blacks feel that they have. And that's kind of the divide here. And that's why it's important to have a discussion about these issues.
It's also, Dominic, the interest level. I was surprised by 2 to 1, like 2 out of 3 blacks watched part or some of the trial, while 1 in 3 whites watched some or part of the trial. And it really spoke to the interest and how they viewed it in terms of its significance. And again, we're painting very broad brushes here, but nonetheless, as snapshot polls, that surprised me a little bit, how important people thought this trial was.
Doesn't surprise me at all, because every black person in America watching the trial saw themselves on trial. And every black person in America knew that Trayvon Martin would be criminalized himself, and thus all of us were criminalized. The only thing I'm shocked at about the poll, and I really am shocked about this, that 9% of African Americans approve of the verdict, because I don't know a single black person. Everyone that's been reasonable has said the jury did the best they could with what they had.
And I agree with that.
I agree with that the prosecutors threw the case. I don't know a single black person that approves of that verdict. Not uno, not one.
What did we see in the OJ case? We saw blacks being happy about the verdict in the OJ case and whites being upset and feeling like the justice was cheated. Now here, that's a situation where it was reversed. Now the jury composition was different, and I think that plays in. The jury composition in OJ was mainly African American and mainly female. I think there was 1 white, whereas we saw in the Zimmerman jury there were 5 whites and 1 Hispanic on the jury. And I think that's the contention. Look, in America, you don't have the right to a jury of your peers. You have a right to a jury.
I want to get to one point before we run out of time. And this came up last night. I think the pastor brought it up, but you guys spoke to it too. And that is, President Obama obviously spoke about the verdict afterwards, and critics said that he was politicizing and bringing race into a question, marginalizing the justice system. But the pastor, and you guys spoke about how this president, regardless of whether you like him or not, has been marginalized, delegitimized since he was a candidate and even when he came into office, unlike maybe any president we've seen, at least in modern memory. Mm-hmm. I saw something in the Washington Times. Now, the Washington Times is a conservative paper and stuff, but the language they used and the imagery that they spoke to, it made me do a little bit of a double take. And the title of it was, Obama Throws Begging Blacks a Race Bone with Trayvon Martin. And look at the analogy they did as to what I thought were very thoughtful remarks. And regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, I saw a lot of conservatives saying, I thought what he said was good, even if they didn't agree with everything. They didn't think it was inflammatory. Well, this writer says, talking about Hadia Pendleton, remember that young girl, the girl who sang or performed at the inauguration, and she was gunned down soon thereafter when she went back to her Chicago neighborhood? Well, anyway, this writer at the time says, when Hadiyah Pendleton was gunned down in Chicago in January of last year by 2 black gang members, days after she performed at the second inaugural, Obama didn't say, Hadiyah looks like my daughters. Does Obama find black-on-black killings more palatable? Why was Trayvon special? Really?
But Richard, what makes the moron that wrote this special? Who cares what he has to say? The First Lady went back to attend the funeral and the wake of the young lady in Chicago. The president spoke out in great detail about that case in Chicago. You're never going to please everybody. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, and you guys sometimes look at me like, what am I drinking? Wait till this president is out of office. You know, it's funny. We've been focusing on David Dinkins, first black mayor. His book arrived at my home today, and I'm looking at it. And, you know, he's admitting in that book for the first time that he felt that he lost because he's black. Wait until Obama's out of office and he tells the truth. Almost everything he does is he's judged as a black man, not as the president of the United States. I believe with all my heart, the #1 reason why the Republicans are trying to stop him, they don't want to see this black man successful as president.
Well, I disagree with that. But listen, more importantly, race is still an issue in this country, and we have to have a serious dialogue about it. Yes, you know, black-on-black crime is high, white-on-white crime. I call these village politics, yeah. When you live in a neighborhood that's concentrated with blacks, there's typically going to be higher crime among blacks. Same thing with whites. In addition to that, we shouldn't, people are taking this and saying, oh, well, you're using race as an excuse of why you can't get further in life. That's not that conversation. No, there are plenty of opportunities now for blacks, whites, and Latinos. We have those opportunities, but this discussion is about race is not over, and it sometimes does impact our lives, as we can see in the Zimmerman trial.
And we're going to end on that note here as we go to break. And again, if I said Washington Post, I'm going to say that piece was in the Washington Times. Okay, when we come back, a major update to a story. We've covered a lot on this program here. Normally it'd be our lead tonight, but given what we saw with the winter press conference, it got pushed down a little bit. Mayor Bloomberg, he just vetoed this afternoon the NYPD oversight bill. Has a lot to do with stop and frisk. Obviously, we'll talk about that after this.